G'day guys, welcome back to the Fon Supercoach YouTube channel. Today we are reviewing the whole season for 2026 Supercoach. In the last round, scored 2,139, went down a few ranks, whatever. That is what it is. I'll just show the final team very quickly. I was pretty lucky not to have any Sydney players at the end, so my week wasn't as catastrophic as others could have, as it was for others, but still missing 1, 2, 3. Okay, it was only 3 premiums in the end. So I actually had a pretty good compared to a lot. Oh, 4. Forgot Shees. Yeah, also the captaincy made a little bit of an error here, but didn't get punished. Wanted Gorn anyway and got the 171. Was going to go Gorn into Baz. So either way, I was getting 171. So that was going to be good. Let's now review the season, because I think that's much more interesting than talking about round 24 when the season is over. So the first thing I want to show is the team at the end of round 1. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with talking about the starting selections, and then we're going to talk about the trades, and we're going to really focus on the decision-making process and the difference between luck and process, and sort of results-based analysis and process-driven analysis. So let's get into it. So firstly, we'll start with the top. So Jack Sinclair, 123 in round 1. Score's not really relevant. But Sinclair was an overwhelmingly good starting pick. Obviously went down with a season-ending injury, but his role was absolutely phenomenal until they changed the game plan a little bit and just started feeding Nas. But yeah, this was a great pick from preseason, and I'm a little bit upset still about opening round, because I was on this pick for the whole preseason, and then the opening round saw his ownership go up by about 50%. So that was a little bit of a disaster. Whitfield, you got to pick someone, and I think what did Whitfield end up going for the whole year? 103. So it's probably not a great result, but the defenders were so bad this year that I'm sort of willing to cop that and just tick that one off. Like, there weren't a heap of great defender rookies, so I kind of got all the good ones, I think. We'll double check that. But yeah, Whitfield, I'm going to say is okay. Rosie as well, I think, was a fine pick. He would have gone 105-ish. The injury was a little bit unlucky, but I guess Rosie is injury prone, but there's the situation that we found out in with defenders, we were going to pick a lemon here either way. So, Rosie scores well at the start, gets injured, is what it is. And then Clark, I've done this to death, but Clark is my least favourite starting pick of all time. And I started Tom Stewart last year. So this, just so frustrating. And I read an article about how one of the things that he did to help improve the Dockers was to stop worrying about stats and stop trying to get these kicks. So it would have been good to read that at the start of the year. But it is what it is. I do think Clark's still a good player. All-Australian this year. Very happy I'm not wasting my time watching that. But yeah, never again for mine. Then the rookies were all quite good, I thought. So yes, we're ticking that one off. So all 4 of the rookies were good picks. I'm trying to think if there was another rookie here. But I can't really see. There's obviously... So the main ones that I missed were Murdoch, Cook, and I guess if you want to throw Watkins in, and Dersma. But none of them are defender rookies. So yeah, we're going to tick this off. Mostly good in defense. Clark was an absolute lemon of a pick. And one that I didn't want. And we're going to talk about what I should have done instead in a little bit. Because obviously I have Windsor down here as well, who I will talk about. I think Windsor, depends on your school of thought. If you really go based on role, which is what I really hedged on in the preseason games, then this pick made sense. But he didn't really show the ability to play the role. And for whatever reason, I really went hard on the mid-prices this year. There are a lot of mid-prices that kind of make sense. We'll go through and talk about them. I think there were some that didn't really make sense. I think some may suggest that that's hindsight analysis. I'm not so convinced. Windsor has never really shown an ability to accumulate. And despite the high level of centre bounces, he was just unable to score. And part of the reason I got sucked in is because Melbourne the whole offseason just talked about feeding him the footy. But when he got into a game, he couldn't actually accumulate, which is something that outside players tend to be able to do in preseason games. So that should have been a big red flag for mine, and I just shouldn't have started this pick. I think I realistically should have gone with Kadeem Coleman and then not a defender in this pick, in this slot. And the reason I should have gone Kadeem Coleman is just because he can score, which means that I could have just, I could have had a different player here and swung him up and used the cash on Clark in the rucks, which we'll talk about when I get to the rucks. But that's defense. Two poor picks, probably both preventable. I really hate that I picked Clark because I was against him the whole preseason, but went there anyway. So what can you do? In the midfield, so Butters and Nick, I'm just going to tick them off. I can't remember what Nick averaged. Let's have a look. So Nick's gone 120. So for 630, that's what you paid for. You get some captain scores. There are some down scores along the way, is what it is. Missed a game, whatever. Pretty good. And then Butters obviously going really well until the injury. Started the season a touch slow, so I didn't get any of these captain scores, which because I didn't have rucks, I got caned. So a little bit unfortunate there, but still think Butters was a good pick overall. And then Errol, I still think this was one of the best starting picks out there, but he got injured after round one and when he was flying. So pretty sad because we've seen him come back in really good nick as well. So, and this was a huge leg up on those who picked Walsh, not so much who went the ones who went LDU instead. But yeah, that was a little bit unfortunate for me. I didn't mention, by the way, in the back line, the picks that I didn't have. So, like, not starting Nas, not starting Ash, I think were good options. Ash dropped. He did start like a house on fire, but the Ash role changed throughout the season, which maybe you couldn't have predicted. I did this with Roberts. I should have seen this coming with Clark. So I picked Clark based on the presumption that the game plan wouldn't change, even though it was detrimental. But then I faded Ash because I thought that he was detrimental to the game plan. Like, the logic didn't make sense to start Clark and fade Ash. So I don't know what I was doing there. But I think Ash was a good pick and probably the only one that I could have gone as a premium instead of Clark. So yeah, that's just on the plays I didn't pick there. And then I'm through the premium midfielders. So the big miss for mine was Luke Davies-Uniacke. I just didn't have the faith. And I think that not starting LDU was not catastrophic. What did he actually average in the end? Let's have a look. So he finished the season averaging 106. So he was a good starting pick. Not a smash, home run pick, but a solid pick, given that the mid premiums like at the lower end this year weren't quite as good unless you got them on them at the right time. And having these ones for the whole season was actually quite difficult. And I probably picked the three outside of Bont, Baz, who did start round one slowly, but most weren't trading into him after that. Outside of like Bont, Baz, and Heaney, I think I got the main ones. And those guys were all expensive, and that's why I didn't want to start them. So yeah, I think I did all right with these premiums all up. And then there's 4 mid prices here. So we'll start with Hayden Young. And I was getting cold feet on this pick before round one, but I just decided to go with the ownership. In hindsight, like a very injury prone midfielder at Freo, I just don't think this pick made sense in the end. Like, obviously we didn't really know that the Fremantle game plan would be so low scoring and difficult to score in outside of like Jackson. Luke Jackson, rather. But yeah, I think this was probably a silly pick. The price point's not great for a guy who hasn't shown premium scoring history. So that's probably one that I should have let go. At the end of the day, I went with the ownership. Wasn't a disaster. Probably got a little bit punished in round one because he was on like 95 at 3/4 time and got injured and finished on 80 in a close game. Is what it is. Parrish, 93. Sorry, I don't care about scores. This is round one. Parrish was a pick that I was originally against, and then I started anyway. When we're talking about process versus results, Parrish didn't result well. Like, the pick didn't pan out well, but I think he was still, like, you kind of had to pick this. Like, the scoring history was there, and at 330, you don't really have to do much. I was expecting Essendon to be bad, but not that bad. So, I don't know. I think Parrish I will tick off even though the result wasn't good, you can make good decisions and have bad outcomes. And I think that's just what happened with Parrish. Not really complaining. Tanner Bruhn, I think the role was too good not to start. We saw in the last practice match and the first, or in opening round. So this is another one where it didn't really pan out. There was some sort of strange injuries and then like a strange role change, which Geelong has a little bit of a tendency to do that. I think Holmes getting swung back was really problematic for Bruhn, but I mean, you just pick the pick on its merits. The role changes you can't really see coming. So I'm okay with the Bruhn pick. And Lindsay is similar to Windsor, where the role was good, but we hadn't seen him do it before. And there was not a lot of evidence in the preseason games that he would be, he wasn't flying, and he was an outside type. And Melbourne was hard to read because of a new coach, but I think because of that, and I'll talk about my early thoughts for next year as well. And Essendon will be similar. A new coach, I think a lot of these speculative type picks are going to be less interesting. But I think that's where Lindsay was, and I think I should have just avoided based on that. Probably had the Melbourne blinders on a little bit too much. But that is what it is. So, so that's why I think Lindsay was a poor pick. I think the process wasn't good. There wasn't enough evidence to suggest that this pick would go well. Jagger Smith, no-brainer, obviously. I think Grill and Sharp and Blamires were all good picks as well. Sharp, people will say, oh, look, he got injured and the role wasn't good, but Sharp was shown to us, and all we would hear about Sharp was he was ready-made and he was ready to go in there straight away and make an impact. And Brad Scott was probably coaching for his job a little bit and didn't want to put the kids in there. So that's why he didn't get that role. Obviously got injured in round 2 or 3 as well. But when he came back, we saw that the talent was there. And this would have been a good pick had the situation been right and a little bit more advertised to us. Not complaining about that pick at all, even though it didn't go well. And then I guess I spoke about the premiums I missed. The rookies that I missed though, Dersma, the process with Dersma was that he was 200k or over 200k and not advertised as an accumulator and playing wing. And with no knowledge of the games played, we'll talk about trades later, but with no knowledge of games played, I'm backing in my decision not to pick Dersma. The ones that I'm ruining that I missed, the main one is Murdoch, who, and I probably have a little bit of a blind spot with players that have come out of the state leagues, particularly the Waffle that I'm not really familiar with, Waffle and Sandful. So a lot of people in the know in the Waffle were very confident that Murdoch would go well. And we saw that right away. So I think next year, once lists are finalised and actually once we see teams, I might even take a day, this is going to sound silly, I might take a day of leave and just do research on all the rookie type players just to make sure that I fully understand what's happening, because I think if I had dug a little deeper, I probably would have got Murdoch, and I may have started him over, I'm touching my mouse, so my thing's just gone black, screens. So I probably would have started him over someone else a little bit more speculative, one of these mid-prices, probably Butterick. He was the one that I added really late. That's kind of where I sit with that. So I think as far as starting teams go, Murdoch was the big miss, and I'm ruining that one. I'm still not too upset about not starting Bont and Heaney and Smith, and I think I got the other ones right, so happy enough with that. Into the rucks, so I'll get to English in a second. McAndrew was obviously one of the best picks of the year, and pretty much everyone had him, so he's not even worth talking about. Zach Ostelski, my situation is a little bit different because I didn't get owned by the late in against Melbourne in round, 6 or 7, no pun intended. I'm still a little bit surprised that he didn't play more, but Fagan is a guy who backs the guys who have been playing already in, and maybe that was enough to say that Zach Ostelski wouldn't play. And at that point, the obvious correct pick here was Mitch Edwards, but again, getting a read on Geelong Ruck situation was so difficult that I'm willing to concede that Mitch Edwards is a player that I should have picked, that it made sense not to pick. Obviously, if you picked, fantastic pick, well done, but I'm comfortable with my decision not to pick Mitch Edwards, which means This should have been a loop, Kalani White. But I don't know, like it didn't. This pick didn't really hurt me, so I'm sort of nonplussed on it. And then Tim English. So the ruck situation was this gave me an absolute hiding. Now, I spoke about Cherry and I spoke about the ruck rules a lot. So I might touch on the ruck rules first. So the first thing, and this sort of supported my decision in the end, but I wasn't anticipating it, is the last touch out of bounds rule just wasn't adjudicated the way I thought it would be. I thought it would only be a free kick off clear disposals, not these ticky-tack, scrape off the boot or errant fist that they decided to play with, arc review and this is nonsense, which, I don't know, they killed that rule, working perfectly in the sample in the AFLW, but for whatever reason, this AFL administration can't get much right. But that actually reduced the number of stoppages. And then the hit out to advantage rate went up a little bit, which hurt this, but let's actually have a look. Did the rucks actually average less? I know Cherry did, but I'll go Gawn. So Gawn, Grundy, and Jackson were the 3 rucks. So Gawn averaged this year 128, which I think is more than last year, which is just absolutely staggering. Yeah, a tiny bit more. So I can't believe that. So, yeah, I can't believe that. Shout out to Max. Unbelievable player. He's just like, the reason for not picking him was that he was old and probably getting rested. And he did get managed. So Grundy was 120 this year. So he averaged 5 less. So the rucks did average a little bit less, but it wasn't like a heap less. Gawn didn't average less, but Grundy did. So misreading that ruck situation was diabolical because if I start Gawn and Grundy instead of like English, Windsor, and Clark, all of a sudden I've got captain's options early. I've got better performing primos and, not Clark. And I've got another rookie who was outperforming the mid-prices anyway. So the decision not to go with 2 rucks was just a disaster. And I think my logic for not starting the 2 rucks was reasonable, but I think like Gawn the age thing, you're better against like whatever. I think to predict that Melbourne would have been this good was going to be brave. And myself as a Melbourne supporter, I thought they wouldn't be bottom 4, but I thought they wouldn't be really pushing for the wild card either. But to be, above the wild card for most of the year and then falling into it after this weekend, which I don't want to even remember, but here we are. No one could have predicted that. But if you could, you would have known that Gawn had to go well this season. So Gawn, I'm kind of conceding. Grundy, I was probably too jaded from last year and him just smashing me week after week. So spite's a dangerous thing. So that was probably a bit foolish. And then Jackson, I'm kind of okay with. So basically what I'm getting at is I should have probably gone Grundy, English, McAndrew, R1, R2 flex. And that's a decision I could have got to. And then at some point traded English into Gawn or Jackson, and then eventually got McAndrew up to the other one. So that's kind of where I was at. I think not starting the other 2 was fine. The reason I'm saying this when I very early on decided that the ruck scoring would go down is that and I mentioned this at the time, it's easier to go down than it is to go up. And starting at the lower end with rucks and having a lot of mid-prices made navigating the situation that I put myself into very difficult. So I think next season, and this makes sense typically anyway, is I'm going to play a little bit more conservative just because the injuries this year were nuts and unpredictable, but it can happen. And playing more conservative at the very least will save you trades. And the conservative strategy versus the more aggressive mid-pricery strategy is that the mid-prices trade points for trades. So you get more points on field in theory, but you make more trades. Whereas the guns and rookies, you get more cash, more trades in theory, but you get less points on field. And I think that particularly with best 18, this I just over hedged on the rookies, on the mid-prices so hard when we knew we had Jagger Smith scoring well. We thought Phillippo and Marshall were going to go really well, and we thought we'd get one good score out of the defenders per week. So it was just silly. It was just silly of me, but I won't go on about it for too much longer. But the lesson here is it's easier to go down than it is to go up. I knew this. I went against this anyway. Didn't play a conservative strategy, and I got punished. And it was hundreds and hundreds of points and put me so far behind from the start. Is what it is. And then in the forward line, I think Sheasel, Petrarca, Flanders were still all good starting picks. A little bit surprised how poorly Flanders went, but the Saints' game plan wasn't really favourable for Flanders. Obviously did get injured. I don't know what price he's going to be next year, but it looks like he's going to play off halfback. And I am not a believer in Sam Flanders off halfback, so I think that'll be interesting. And I think that it won't last there. So not a pick for mine next year, but we'll see how the preseason goes. Butterick, I probably got sucked in a little bit by opening round. This was my bad opening round selection, whereas Petrarca and... Because I was on the fence about Petrarca, but Petrarca and Bruin were my good opening round selections. So is what it is, I guess. You win some, you lose some. Butterick wasn't a disaster, still made a little bit of cash, but obviously having a Braden Cook here instead would have been far, far, far superior. What can you do? And then Phillippo, Marshall, Lombard, and Robertson, I still think were all good picks. Marshall just was a defensive liability and Carr was onto that early, so what can you do? But obviously the one that I missed here was Cook. So it is what it is. I think Pickett as a starting option as well, potentially over Clark, would have been a good one. What can you do? So yeah, that's the forward line. The main miss there was Cook. But I had an opportunity to trade into Cook and I didn't do it. Although Cook might have been mid-only at the start of the year. So, just a disaster. Actually, I can probably find out if Cook was mid-only at the start of the year because I talk about it in one of the other videos. But anyway, missed Cook, missed Murdoch. They're the big misses. I don't think any of the premiums were disastrous outside of the Ruck situation. What I should have done is just turned Clark and Windsor into like Grundy and Murdoch. Would have given me cash to play around with. Could potentially have gotten Hayden Young up to LZU then. All of a sudden, that's like that starting team is miles ahead of where this one is, just with a couple of changes. So, is what it is. That was the starting team. Probably the most misses I've had this year. So, just to recap, Clark was a bad pick. I think Young was a bad pick in the end. Lindsay and Windsor just not informed enough. And Butterick, I'm on the fence about that. So, that's where I sit. The real damage I did to my season was in the trades. And I'm going to go through round by round now and just take us to the trade screen. I'm going to make sure that you guys can see this as well. Trade history, just checking you can see this. Yes, you can. All right, let me scroll all the way down to the bottom. So the first set of trades I made, I had Goulden and Young injured in round 2, and I traded both of them because I knew Goulden would be long-term. The reporting on Young was poor, but I backed in the fact that Young has poor injury history, so he's not gonna be back soon. So I'm ticking off both those moves as being good. The ins were Murdoch and Dawson. I'm still standing behind the Murdoch in early. I had to get someone, and he was the best performing rookie, even more so than Cook. So he was the one that I wanted. The other option was potentially Dersma. As you can see, I've got a lot of cash left over. However, Murdoch was cheaper, had the more secure role, and he was just better. So that's where I went with. The issue with this trade that I have is going Dawson. So the main reason for that is obviously Dawson ended up being a reasonable premium pick, but you wanted to get on him in the middle of the year. And Dawson is typically like that. He starts a bit slower and then he gets going once the game is a little bit more contested for whatever reason. Maybe that's because the kicks off the ground are ineffective instead of clangers and things like that. But yeah, I'm not happy with that. Obviously, a lot of the times when I made poor decisions, I got punished much harder than maybe I should have. And this was one of those situations. Got injured, obviously, for a week and then had the tragedy with his brother and missed a week with that as well. So a little bit of a shame there, but what can you do? That was far from my worst decision this year, but just a little bit of a learning process. What should I have done instead there? So I should have just carried the cash. I was too concerned with spending the cash as I got it, whereas I should have prioritized my cash gen because that would have saved me trades down the line. So I think I should have actually either gone Cook or Dersma. That's very hindsight to say that, given that I didn't go either of those rookies anyway, and just really hedged on the cash. Or I should have gone for a Pickett or an Ash. They were the other options that were at a similar price point. I may have made it a mid, but I believe I could have swung Rosie or Petrarca in. So yeah, I could have made that work. So that's probably where I should have gone. Or a Ruck, but I was very stubborn at this point, despite all of them going nuts early on, including Cherry, who I never liked Cherry until I saw the 200 next week. So let's talk about round 3, this is the round that torpedoed my season. So firstly, the outs, Rosie, Windsor, Sharp, 2 of which were injured. Windsor I moved on because he was going to be no good. Petrarca I held because I guessed that the hamstring was going to be at the lower end of the spectrum. I'm backing that decision in. 3 weeks when people are dropping like flies and I had other spot fires in my team was just worth holding to me. He did come back, play well at the start, and then fall off a cliff. Couldn't have predicted that sort of form drop off in the middle of the season. Probably playing with a foot injury for a little bit longer than reported is what it is. The outs were not the problem here. It was the ins. And all 3 of these ins were huge, huge, huge fails. So the first one is Houston. Let's start with Houston. So why did Houston come in? Because he had 2 good scores early with a high volume of disposals, and the coach said we want the ball in his hands. Now, based on those facts, that was a good trade-in. However, I have eyes, and I can actually watch games rather than just read stats and read coaches' comments. And I actually watched the Collingwood games afterwards because I was so confused about how bad, because Houston had dropped a stinker the next game. And I was just so confused by how bad he was. And what I saw was someone who was not working for the ball, someone who was a bit lazy and was probably benefiting from the early games back where the pressure wasn't as high, more open, more space. So yeah, this was shocking, shocking trade in. And you just got to watch the games for these more speculative types picks. I got sucked in a little bit by history as well. Houston has been a good scorer in the past, but this was a bad pick. The guy was lazy. I needed to do a little bit more of my homework here, and I should have just seen that this was not a good pick. The next one is Cherry. I don't think in all of Supercoach there's been a trade-in offer 200 that's gone well. And the exception to that rule might have been Isaac Rankin a few weeks ago. This was an unmitigated disaster. Now, why was this a disaster? Because the game Cherry went 200. And I spoke about this. I remember. He took a bunch of late game contested marks, probably got 40 points from those. He was against Flynn, who was useless around the ground, useless in the contests, and he was in a game that was unusually high stoppage. And I knew all of that, and I still did it. And that is what annoys me the most. This killed my season. If this was Grundy or Jackson or Gawn or Bailey Smith, I would have been flying at this point. Absolutely flying. But here we are. I got Cherry, and that was a disaster, and he had to go out the next round. Watkins over Cook was also another horrible, horrible, horrible decision. And the main issue with this one was that the volume against West Coast was what I went with. And I knew that he wasn't entrenched in the best 23. I should have just watched this game again and just seen that he was just getting he had no pressure on him, which is why he was getting so much of the footy. Because I think he dropped a 6 the next week and I just held him because, whatever. But yeah, this was a disaster. And it just should have gone to Cook, who had been in the system a little bit longer and had attributes to make him a good winger. The other option here was Dersma. But again, I'm probably backing myself in going Cook over Dersma. The real solution that this should have been is it should have actually just been Gawn, Grundy, or Jackson with Watkins and Dersma in and prioritize the cash gen and spent the cash next week. But yeah, just disastrous. disastrous. So that's the situation I found myself in. Now, why am I saying all this about prioritizing cash gen? Because cash is king. Yes, typically you finish a side. However, this year we had really good rookies and my side was really bad. So I was so fixated on getting points on field when I should have just taken the hit and made sure the cash was right. And this season, that would have paid off even bigger dividends than normal because of how poor the trade situation was down the line. So those are the first couple of weeks of trades, which were just diabolical in the end, that second week. So then in round 4, it was Cherry and Parrish out. Both had to go, in my opinion. And Holmes and Myers in. Holmes was one of my few smashed out of the park trades, and that was just because he had a good role. CBAs plus kick-ins is just a no-brainer of a role. The other side of this was Myers, and I got unlucky here because the torn ACL the week later, and just the situation that unfolded where he was laid out on the Monday in a Monday game, and the sides don't need to be named until Sunday, and obviously like the situation was super unlucky. So I think this was more of a luck thing than a process thing. I think the process was okay. Good scoring the last sort of 10 weeks of the season before, a couple of good scores early. I'm saying that was unlucky. That being said, the buy situation wasn't great, and I probably should have seen that Pickett was going to play pretty much full-time midfield here and just gone for the safe pick rather than the pottish type pick. So the process may not have been great, but there was an element of luck here that I'm willing to let go. And then in round 5, we had the English injury and trading out Xavier Lindsay. I think he got injured here as well. Made a 30 or 40 grand, whatever. And then in Farrow and Gawn. Probably should have gone Grundy, who was 50k cheaper here than Gawn, but mostly this trade was quite good. The Gawn over Grundy was quite punishing because of Max Heath coming in 1 week later for a 4-week stretch, I think. So that was a little unfortunate, but what can you do? The reason I went Gawn over Grundy was purely because it made watching Melbourne games more fun, and I'll live with that decision. So that is what it is. Round 6, Dawson, Butterick, and Robertson out, all 3 injured. So at this point, I've had 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 injury trades, plus the Cherry suspension. So 10 forced-ish trades. You could argue that Dawson wasn't forced. I know other people who had Dawson at this point didn't trade. I just didn't know how long he was going to miss, so that's why I went there. And then went Pickett, Worrell, Perez. Pickett and Perez were fine. Like, Perez was whatever. And Pickett was obviously a good pick. Worrell, I probably got sucked in a little bit by fixture and previous scores when this situation for him was quite good. Basically what happened is Keane comes back and Miller starts taking more kick-ins and the Crows play a little bit faster. What a surprise. And less of this keepings off stuff. And the Crows did have problems moving the ball from half back, but the solution to that isn't to play this chip mark nonsense in the D50. So this is probably a little bit of a silly pick, but at the end of the day, the backline was full of lemons this year, and I'll cop this trade. It's again not an absolute disaster. Should have gone Roberts here. Essendon had no reason to change the game plan. They were so bad that they weren't going to start winning games, and they were just such in the muck that Roberts was always going to rack up these numbers until he got injured. So yeah, I should have just gone Roberts here. That would have been the better play. The role was so good, and that would have been hundreds of points. And then round 7, moved on Myers, moved on Sarong, moved on Jagger. So I went early on Jagger, really. I had this issue last year as well when I traded out Levi Ashcroft early and lost about 80k of cash gen. I just had a bad read on the Carlton situation. So Jagger playing half forward for Voss. If I held for 3 more weeks, Voss gets sacked. All of a sudden, Jagger goes back in, and he's actually a forward keeper. And I save a trade or 2 in that respect. So, yeah, probably not a great trade out, but I don't know. The situation was hard to read. Didn't know how long Voss would last. Didn't know what the response would be like. Didn't know what the role would be like once Voss got sacked. But typically when the old coach gets sacked, the new coach allows the players to play with more flair and sort of puts them in their primary positions. So, yeah, maybe should have seen that coming. Voss was obviously going to get sacked. And then the trade-ins were Anderson, McInerney, Miller. Took Miller's role wasn't great, but I think that pick actually panned out in the end. What did Took Miller average in the end? So traded him in, what is this, round 6? I think I traded him here. So was averaging 100, average 95. So yeah, not great. This 55 would typically have fallen off though, as would this 67. But yeah, not many great scores. This probably wasn't a good trade in the end. The role just wasn't good. I sort of thought he would work his way through it. Eventually he got moved into a better role, which was lucky enough for me. But yeah, I just thought there was no way that Took Miller wouldn't average like 95. So whatever, took the punt. Wasn't a disaster. Wasn't a home run. Is what it is. McInerney got unlucky with the injury, in my opinion. There were better forwards around, but is what it is. Not a disaster. And then Angry Anderson was good. And then round 8, out, Farrow, Blamise, Jakes, all fine outs for Rechko, Artie Jones, and Dunkley. Just didn't need to take this punt on Dunkley. I think I thought I was in a worse situation than I was. Just need to play a little bit more patient. It's hard to know how much the rookies you get at this point will make. But obviously Rechko was really good. Will Edwards ended up being quite good, who I got a week later. And then there was also Hugo Hall-Kahan. The mid-season draft tends to give you 1 or 2. Gave us 3 this year with Fitzgerald and Herbert as well. Didn't need to do this, so that's obviously problematic. I did avoid McCluggage. I think this week was McCluggage for most, maybe next. But I did avoid that, which was fortunate. Probably should have just gone someone else like an Ash, a Neil, or Washcroft, someone like that. But yeah, ended up going Dunkley. I did want a line at this point, so Neil or Ashcroft was probably the ones to go for. Neil was always going to turn it around. I don't know what Neil was at this point. Where are we? Round 8? I know Ashcroft was going poorly, and I wanted to wait for the turn in form, but I didn't wait for the turn in form with Dunkley, so yeah, 570. I should just go on this. This was a no-brainer, even though Neil stunk it up the next week. But yeah, I should have just gone for the person in better form, didn't have off-season surgery, who is just a natural pig, whereas Dunkley's more of the defender type midfielder. So yeah, not a great trade in there, as is very obvious with how that panned out. Round 9, Grill, Selwood, Marshall out for Will Edwards, Finn Callahan, and Cumming. I still maintain that Finn Callahan was a layup at 500k. Didn't pan out. Hopefully with Tom Green back, he goes a little bit better. But yeah, the Giants were in all sorts as well. So is what it is. I think mostly this round was pretty good as far as trades go and process. So is what it is. Maybe you could argue Cumming wasn't great. He was what was around though. So is what it is. And then Bruin and Filippo out in round 10. Filippo held long enough to make his catch. And then in the Bont and Hamilton. I don't know if there were other rookies around in round 10, but I would have liked to not have gone Hamilton here. And I'm going to go controversial. Shouldn't have traded in the Bont. Knew he was playing sore. Figured a rest would come. It's not... The rest isn't so much problematic when you get to 23 premiums. The problem is actually the playing sore and dropping stinkers because of it. Like, Bont ended up not going that well at the end of the year, which I will demonstrate. Like, finished at 515k. Like, that's unheard of for Bont. And as you can see, some really average scores here. Obviously going okay here, but nothing to write home about until this game. But then goes an 80. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe this wasn't disastrous, but I did say at the time that I thought Heaney and Smith would get managed. Heaney didn't get managed, but obviously the Sydney stuff happened, which was probably a very fortunate bullet dodged for me. But Baz, yeah, he didn't end up getting managed. But Geelong drops some games, and I still think that contributed to it. So, yeah, I'm not sure what I should have gone here instead, but yeah, Bont, not the greatest trading in the end. Probably should have actually gone a Ruck. But I was targeting Darcy Cameron in round 11. I think these trades were fine. Maybe this was an opportunity to hold trades, hold Cumming for another week, just to get a little bit more data and then not get Cameron. Cameron was by far not my worst issue. So yeah, not a disaster here. Round 12, McAndrew, Lindsay Lombard, all good outs. Ison, Oliver, Banfield. All seemed like reasonable ins at the time. I think Banfield didn't end up making much. He sat on my bench for the whole game. The whole year, rather. Yeah, made 30k. Disastrous. Whatever. I don't know. They seemed pretty reasonable at the time, so not complaining. Holding this trade as well would have allowed me to do other things going forward. But yeah, I think I was just in a rush to get points on field this year, which backfired. Then round 13, we had the Flanders injury, Rechko out, Horn Francis and Rao. I'm going to say these are good trade-ins. I know Rao didn't go marvellously, but Horn Francis was quite a good trade-in until he got injured, so happy enough with that. If I'd held a trade, I could have got Rankin. Rankin is someone that I was very keen on once he got up and running, so is what it is. And then round 14, Houston, McInerney, Anderson out. Houston bad, McInerney injured, Anderson topped out in cash. In back, Jordan Dawson, Hawker Durham. There's a good trades. Again, Durham was going well till he got injured. So he's made of glass, Durham. So for 360, I was willing to pay that. But I wouldn't have paid 400 probably. So these are good trades. I'll tick them off. And then round 15, it was Dunkley, Murdoch, Jones out for Luke Jackson and Joel Fitzgerald. And then Sicily. I was probably always going to get a lemon here. This realistically needed to be my boy Jake Bowie, but Bowie was going into a bye here. So then it probably should have been Jarman Impey, to be honest. Or I won't suggest Ollie Florin. I wasn't even thinking about him, but I was thinking about Impey. But yeah, I was probably getting a lemon here either way. I think the other options I tossed up were probably like Mills and similar options that I made here, similar trade options. So yeah, it was always getting a lemon here. But that is what it is. And then out, Sinclair injury in George Hewitt in round 16. I think that was okay. Got a little bit unlucky with the Hewitt injury, missing a week and having a down couple of games, but he was mostly good. Then out, it was Edwards and Hall Kahan for Zorko and Artemis. Shouldn't have gone Zorko. He was obviously going to get managed as Brisbane came in on the home straight. Round 19, Bud is out, injured in Bailey Smith. Good trades by me, if I do say so myself. And then round 20, out Holmes in Millera. Again, was going to get a lemon here. The only way I could have avoided that was going Jake Bowie, but I just wasn't sure he'd keep it up. Went Millera and got punished very, very hard for that. But Mills didn't go particularly well either. Blakey got suspended, obviously. I couldn't afford Nass, which is why I didn't go there. I don't know. I was doomed to fail with this trade, so we'll tick that one off. Again, just to recap, the damage was really done early in round 3. And then, what other rounds were particularly bad? Like, Worrell wasn't great. This was an unnecessary punt, this Dunkley trade in. Good to know that I can actually just click the names and go to their players. Sorry for those who already knew that and were pulling their hair out watching me not do that. So that's the year in review. As you can see, one really ill-informed round of trading can torpedo your year. And I'm firmly of the belief that if I trade properly in round 3, I finish at least 15,000 ranks higher, despite not having a perfect's the wrong word, a great starting team. But yeah, this trade was horrible. Absolutely horrible. Did I get a little bit unlucky with injuries? Yes. I think compared to others, no one went Dawson here. Pretty much no one went Myers here. McInerney wasn't really highly owned. Trying to look for other injuries. They're the main ones. Maybe I got a little bit more unlucky than most, but that's part of the game, and you got to trade better to mitigate that risk, and I didn't do that, so that's why I ended the season ranked 20k, which I think is my first time outside the top 1%, so a little bit sour about that, but we live and we learn. That's the year in review. This is my favorite video of the year, I must admit. It doesn't typically get the numbers because people have dropped off and lost interest at this point, but that is what it is. Early thoughts for next year. I really like Will Ashcroft in particular next year because it looks like Neil and maybe Zach Bailey are moving on. So that will make Will Ashcroft a very interesting pick. Lots of CBAs for him. It may also make Levi and Dunkley interesting picks. McCluggage is going to be dirt cheap with a full preseason, probably a no-brainer. The other options I really like is Errol Goulden, who I believe will be forward eligible. And then in defense, I don't even know in defense, to be honest. I need to have a look when the prices come out. Defense was such a dog's breakfast this year, and I think we will probably see defenders scoring less. Like Sinclair's another year older, Whitfield's another year older. Ash got moved out of there. Nass will still have defender status, so he's probably the obvious one to start. I think there's going to be some mid-priced types, but I can't put my finger on who those will be. And then I think there's Tom Green as well in the midfield, I should mention. Finn Callahan will be cheap. Like, I think there's going to be a heap of good options and no opening round next year as well, so we're not restricted by that. Who else will be around? That's the question. I'm trying to think. There are some more obvious forwards that I'm forgetting. I think some injured ones. So yeah, my early thoughts are not particularly good at this point. Rowan Marshall, who I think doesn't have forward status, but if he moves on from St Kilda, I think he'll be a good pick. Tom Morris is reporting that he's one of the team. It's either Geelong or the Dogs. The Dogs doesn't make sense to me, like, unless they move English on, so which I don't see them doing. So I don't know why he would go there, but if he doesn't end up at the Dogs, he's very, very, very interesting in my opinion. I'm trying to think who else is there. Connor Rozee will probably be another interesting one, but needs a good preseason. Petrarca, I think, will be interesting again. Will have forward status. Don't expect him to be used the way he has been this year. And then it's other sort of players that are moving on. Kieran Briggs is going to Richmond. Not sure if that'll be an interesting pick or not, but we will see. And then there'll be other player movement and such that will create opportunity. So there's sort of my very rough early thoughts for next year. So yeah, we will tackle that when the first Supercoach opens for next year for AFL. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. I am playing finals, but I won't be doing videos for that. This is a team for the first week. I should actually put the captains on the right people. So we'll go... I'm sensing Inspirational Bond into Gorn. And we'll run with that. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. I will see you next year. Well, it'll be this year, but when Supercoach opens for 2026. So hope you all had a great year. Hope you've enjoyed the content. I'm going to try and pump out more content next preseason. So yeah, I'm keen to get into that when that comes. And I will see you then. Bye, guys.